Ensuring your 3D models have accurate dimensions is extremely important for various reasons. This could be if you're using your model for virtual reality, video games, if you're planning on doing any sort of rendering, the lighting and texturing can also be affected if your models are not dimensionally accurate. When you put your model in with other models, this can also have an effect, and as well as if you plan on 3D printing. So let's find out exactly how to create or make your models dimensionally accurate. So, of course, first thing you want to do is just go ahead and delete. I'm just going to delete everything. Let's just do it. Okay, so I went ahead and found this reference image of a Tesla Model S, I believe it is. I'm not entirely sure. But it gave me four different perspectives of the vehicle. You may not be as lucky in finding, a blueprint that comes with all four. It may only come with two. It could only come with the front and side perspective. So you might have to do some extra research or find other reference images that are close enough to match your blueprint. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into our front perspective. This is just somewhere where I like to start. It doesn't really matter what side or, angle you start with. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Shift A and add in our reference. All right, so here is our reference image and whatever that might be for you. So right away, I'm going to rename this as front, as we are going to work with the front part of the vehicle. And I'm going to hop into our object data properties and just turn that opacity down so I can see the axis lines here. So I'm just going to G for grab and kind of move this in the center. And luckily our object and I would believe most things in the world are somewhat symmetrical. So hopefully you don't have any issues with that. So I'm going to find the middle line as best as possible. And what I like to do is line it up with the actual axis line. And so that is the x-axis up here. You could see in the gizmo, it's nice and red, but you also have the gizmo that shows it up here. Okay, so right away, I want to go ahead and add in that cube. So the cube is going to help guide us in regard to making sure the reference image is scaled appropriately to what we need it to basically match when we go and eventually take this reference image into modeling. And this will make sense as soon as we start progressing and when we get past this initial step. So I'm going to go ahead and just move this cube right back into the center. And I just toggled X-ray mode. I'm going to GZ and just move this up until it's also meeting the floor. I'm just going to call this the floor right here. It's matching up with those tires nicely. All right, so first thing we want to start with, and we have two different options here. We have the Z, we also have the X. And how do I know this? Again, I like looking at this gizmo. You can see these arrows are going up and down, and that is our Z axis here. We have right to left, that is our positive X to our negative X. So it's basically our X axis. So we have two axes that we can work with. So I'm going to tap N and go to our dimensions here. And this is basically what we are going to work off of. And another important thing to note is you want to go into your scene properties and check out what units you're going to be using. You can see I can work with the imperial or I can work with metric. I'm going to stick with metric just because I think it reads a lot easier than imperial. But you have the option to change that if you wish. You have your length here. You can change it to whatever you need it to be. Metric in meters is good enough for me. We have scale and we have dimensions. What we are going to work off specifically are the dimensions. This is what is going to give us that realism, that proper scaling when you have it with other objects, whether it be the tire size, or say you have a tree in the scene. You want to make sure everything is achieving as much realism as possible and that it makes actual sense. Okay, so enough jibber jabber. Let's go ahead and I keep looking at the z-axis, so let's just go ahead and do that. So again, we're working with dimensions. So z right here, we're going to type in 1.45 and hit enter, and you can see our cube shifted there, and that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and also do the x-axis, which is 2.09. All right, so I'm going to grab the cube and shift it back to the 3D cursor, or you could do a shortcut as Shift S and go ahead and do cursor to selected, which actually the origin point is in the center, so that wouldn't work. So enough of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab our reference image here. And now the whole point of this is to scale our reference image to match the correct dimensions of the cube. So we have the cube. Don't worry about the Y. We haven't touched the Y yet, but we have the X and Z accurate to the correct dimensions of a Tesla. So now what we want to do is just scale our reference image to the cube, basically just matching it. So what I'm going to do is, you can see if I just scale right now, it's going to shift everything. And I want it to stay nice in the center. So I'm just going to go ahead and toggle 3D cursor as our pivot point, since it's right in the center. So if I just scale up now, you could see the tires aren't coming off the ground. Okay, so I'm just going to have it to where, you know, the mirrors are sort of touching the sides of the cube, and the top here is just touching. And you could see we could probably get away with scaling a little bit more if we wanted to, or maybe we need to move the Tesla up off the ground so that it's touching that a little bit better. Perfect. So we have our front scaled, and obviously we haven't touched the side perspective yet. So we're going to go ahead and do that. What I like to do is go up here into our filter properties and toggle selectable. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off this front cube or front reference image, so that way I don't accidentally click it and move it around when we're working with the other image. All right, so hopping into our right perspective now, doing a Shift A, image, reference. Again, same deal. So I was actually a little bit confused about this. Not that it's rotated backwards, but actually, let's just go ahead and fix this up first, and then I'll tell you what confused me. Okay, so you can see that we have the car headlights, you know, are pointed this way, but in this reference image, they're pointed backwards, and we don't want that. We want, you know, the lights to be facing the same direction. The hood, you know, is going towards the front. So what we need to do, and again, this may not be an issue depending on your reference images that you use, is I need to rotate this 180 degrees on the z-axis. I'm literally just rotating, and if you don't know it's 180, you can just do R, Z, and then, you know, just rotate it until you get it proper the way you need it to be. Okay. So now what I want to do is just hop into the right. And again, I'm going to rename this as side. And obviously you can name it whatever you want. It could be right, left, whatever works for you. And what I'm going to do now is grab this cube, and based on, well, actually, this is where I got confused, right? So I'm hopping over to this side so we can see the words properly. It's 2.87 meters, and you have 4.7 meters here. If we just scaled this cube to, again, I'm going to use the dimensions. So 2.7, hitting enter. Again, you know what we kind of have to do here. So I looked at this and I was like, wait a second, you know, this isn't correct. Why is this so tall? We had, you know, fit this car into its proper X or Z dimension. But when you look at this, the hood is nowhere near touching the top of the cube, which is the correct height of what it should be. Now, when you look at this bottom reference is actually 4.7 meters. So just keep in mind that, you know, your references may be a little bit misleading. So I think what this one here is trying to tell me is that's the space between the two tires, or the four tires, I suppose. So technically the y-axis should be 4.7 meters. So again, the reason I'm just pointing that out is to make sure you're really looking at your reference images. Everything should be touching, so what I mean by that is, so now I'm going to go ahead and scale since I changed the cube y-axis to 4.7, which was the one down here. You can see now it's touching and everything is fitting nice and properly inside of the cube, which is how it should be. And if it's not fitting, maybe you're not reading the reference image correctly, or there's some sort of misinformation happening there. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to go ahead and turn the opacity up. And for the side, I'm going to push the reference image to the back, so that way our cube is in front of the reference image. Okay, so this pretty much continues. So we're going to go ahead and do our top perspective, which this will be our top. Okay, so again, we want the headlights to be going towards the front. So rotating on the Z, scaling. Everything should be touching. You can see I'm a little off center here, and I have this overhanging on this side. So I'm going to do a GX, move everything. Okay, so that's pretty close there. So this is our top perspective. So again, we're going to name this top. And if you don't want to see your reference images in all the different perspectives, is you can just toggle at only axis aligned, and that will disable it in any other view. So if you go into top view, you'll still see it, but if you go out of that, it will be invisible. Okay, so I believe the last one here is just the back of the vehicle. So because we have a front perspective and we have a back perspective, what I'm actually going to do is re-enable the selectable. And with our front, I'm going to do a GY and just move it away, because once we add in that back reference image, they'll just be intersecting each other and it will get really frustrating to look at. And another thing is you want to go ahead and change the side to front. You can leave this at default if you want. I'm going to go ahead and enable that as back. But if you don't want to see it when you're in back perspective, definitely toggle front, because that is the front of the perspective of the reference image. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in the back reference image. So we have that here. Again, just scaling it appropriately. I'm going to move this down. Our 3D pivot point is the 3D cursor. Scaling, GX, centering it as best as possible. Okay, so there it is. We have our reference images all lined up. So now everything is the way it should be. So now we can go ahead and hide this cube. So now we have our reference images all scaled appropriately. So now when you actually go into model, your vehicle will be the correct dimensions, whatever that may be for you. I hope this helped, and thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.